Hong Kong is a city steeped in strange and unexplained supernatural tales. Among the many, there's a local takeout restaurant story that some of you may have heard, while others have not. This eerie incident unfolds in the early 90s, a time before the age of advanced internet ordering and Uber Eats. Back then, takeout and delivery orders were placed the old school way, through landline telephones. This quaint eatery was nestled on a serene street in Jordan. It embodied the essence of a typical mom-and-pop establishment, known for their artful hand-pulled noodles and delicious dumplings. While it wasn't a grand venue, its cozy space was usually bustling with customers. The owner was a familiar face. He had a couple of dedicated employees who managed various tasks, ranging from food preparation to answering phone calls and order taking and deliveries. One evening, after the restaurant was closed up, peculiar events started to unfold. With daily closing duties completed, the employees gathered at the empty tables waiting for the owner's signal to call it a night. You see, the boss, who typically stayed behind in the back room to tally up the day's earnings, was usually the last to finish. This was the usual nightly routine where everyone headed out together once the owner wrapped things up. However, on this particular night, the boss took a bit more time than usual. When he finally emerged from the back room, his face wore a distinct frown, and he held something in his hands as he walked out. That evening marked the beginning of something truly mysterious. With a stern and angered demeanor, the boss slammed something onto the table, right before the eyes of all the employees. It was a $10,000 bill, but not your typical Hong Kong dollar note. It was a hell note. For those unfamiliar, a hell note is a form of traditional currency used in Chinese rituals, often burned during events like funerals. The belief is that when these notes are incinerated, they provide the deceased loved ones with money to use in the afterlife. Strangely enough, the boss had stumbled upon several hell notes intermingled with the day's earnings. "I've always treated you all fairly. You're getting paid better than most other restaurants that are paying their employees, and this is how you repay me? This is no joke. I won't tolerate pranks like this. Who's responsible?" The boss's voice was filled with frustration and anger. However, there were no answers. None of the employees had any idea what had transpired, let alone who might have played such a prank. The boss threw the hell notes away, retaining only one. He placed it back into the cash register, serving as a clear reminder for anyone who opened the register. He had no tolerance for such incidents to recur. The following night, as the employees completed their usual closing tasks and awaited the boss to finish counting the day's earnings, it happened again. Like deja vu, the boss emerged from the back room and angrily slammed new hell notes onto the table. These fresh hell notes had somehow found their way into today's earnings. His anger was even more palpable this time. He had explicitly warned everyone the previous night not to let this happen again. He was determined to uncover the person behind this mysterious act. However, the employees remained silent, genuinely puzzled by these strange incidents. Frustrated, the boss took drastic steps. He locked the front door gates, trapping everyone inside the restaurant. His ultimatum was clear: if no one confesses to this tonight, no one is going home. About 5 minutes later, Sammy, the timid delivery boy, finally spoke up. He nervously confessed that he had some suspicions, revealing his unsettling encounters for the past 2 days. It all began with phone calls to the restaurant, both originating from the same address. At first, he expected routine orders. However, the moment he picked up the telephone receiver, and heard the voice on the other end, he was overcome with an eerie sensation. The voice belonged to an elderly man, yet it was disturbingly raspy, as if the man had holes in his throat. Speaking seemed difficult, as if each word was a struggle for him. It sounded as if air was escaping from him as he spoke. Sammy got goosebumps hearing his voice. The man had placed a rather substantial order, enough food for 4 people, and requested delivery to a village on the outskirts of town. While the voice on the phone gave Sammy the creeps, he didn't pay it much mind. He diligently prepped the order and loaded it onto his bicycle for delivery. Sammy followed a map until he reached the designated address. The place he arrived at was an ancient, dilapidated village. Most of the houses were nearly swallowed by overgrown vegetation, presenting a scene of decay and disarray. It took Sammy about an hour of searching to locate the specified house, and when he finally found it, he couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. The house seemed abandoned, its front gate heavily rusted, the yard swallowed by unruly plant life, and a thick layer of dust on the front door. It looked like something out of a horror movie. It looked like nobody has lived there in a long time. Despite the creepy appearance of the house, Sammy mustered the courage to knock on the door. He knocked 3 times and waited for a response, but nothing came for a few minutes. Then, as the minutes ticked by, the same raspy voice from the phone whispered from behind the door. The voice asked Sammy to leave the food by the doorsteps. A small crack opened at the front door, and a very pale hand emerged, gripping a Hong Kong $100 bill to pay for the food. As Sammy reached for the bill, his curiosity got the better of him, and he tried to steal a glimpse inside the home. However, all he could see was pitch blackness. A mysterious and foul odor seeped out of the house. Sammy couldn't quite identify the stench, but it made his stomach churn, nearly causing him to retch. Sammy never got a glimpse of the person behind the door. They remained hidden in the shadows. He thought perhaps the individual wasn't dressed, or was simply shy. He swiftly took the money and decided it was time to leave. He had no intention of lingering here any longer than necessary. The following afternoon, it happened once more. The same eerie voice called the restaurant, placing the same order for a meal meant for 4 people. Sammy, with a sense of familiarity with the routine, assembled the food, hopped on his bicycle, and pedaled to the same mysterious house. This time, he reached the destination much quicker, having been there before. He knocked on the door just as he had done yesterday, and once again, the pale hand extended from a crack in the front door, offering a crisp $100 Hong Kong bill. Before Sammy could inquire about change, the door promptly slammed shut. Back at the restaurant, Sammy added the money he had received from this unusual order into the cash register. As for the sudden appearance of hell notes in the register, Sammy genuinely claimed he had no explanation. He recalled carefully double and triple checking the money he had received from the pale hand while at the house, confirming it was indeed Hong Kong dollar bills, leaving him baffled as to how and why it had transformed into hell notes. That is why, when the boss brought this up the first night, he didn't link these 2 events together. It was not until the second night in a row this happened that Sammy started suspecting that something was wrong. Upon hearing Sammy's story, the boss remained skeptical, suspecting Sammy of stealing money and then coming up with this extraordinary tale to hide his tracks. However, the other employees came to Sammy's defense. They vividly remembered that when he returned from delivering the order, he had indeed placed Hong Kong currency in the register. Sammy had shared his surprise about the generous tip he had received from the customer who ordered, emphasizing that they had given him a whole $100 bill and didn't even want any change. The other employees distinctly recalled this incident, confirming that the bill Sammy put into the register was undoubtedly genuine Hong Kong currency, not L notes. A decision was made on the spot. The boss declared that he would personally deal with the situation if the mysterious house called again to place another order. He wanted to see who was messing around. The following day, the call came in once more, originating from the same house with the same airy voice, and the order was identical. The boss and Sammy packed the order together and then headed over to the house together, since Sammy knew the way. Upon arrival at the house, the boss instructed Sammy to wait by the bicycles, emphasizing that he would handle the delivery himself this time. He walked up to the house, knocked on the door, and strategically positioned himself to the right side of the front door, intending to catch a glimpse of the inside as the door opened. Slowly, the door cracked open. The boss peered inside the darkness beyond, but all he could discern was an inky void, despite the bright daylight outside. Then he noticed it. A single eye, wide open, fixated intently on the boss through the narrow opening. The eye looked as if someone was shocked or horrified. It was wide open, and it had very noticeable small red veins where the whites are, making it very red, as if this person hadn't slept in ages. Witnessing this eerie sight, the boss was struck dumb, his body drenched in cold sweat. He remained paralyzed, mouth agape. From the gap, a Hong Kong $100 bill fell to the ground, and the voice repeated its request for them to leave the food on the floor and then shut the door. The boss, in a moment of clarity, picked up the money from the ground and rushed back to Sammy and the bicycles. They returned to the restaurant in complete silence. Upon arriving, the boss presented the $100 bill from the strange customer, and all of the employees confirmed that it was indeed a real bill. As the employees returned to work, the boss settled in front of the cash register, his gaze fixed on the $100 bill. His mind was consumed by the thoughts of its connection to the mysterious hell notes that had confused them for the past 2 days. He pondered if this peculiar customer was truly linked to those eerie occurrences. Recollecting the haunting image of that eye behind the cracked door, his heart continued to race uncontrollably. The boss made a deliberate choice to place this particular bill into its own separate drawer under the cash register, and then firmly closed the drawer. To prevent any possibility of it being swapped or tampered with, he sat himself by the register for the remainder of the day. This way, nobody could put money in or take money out without him knowing. As the closing hour approached, the boss gathered the employees to witness the process of counting the day's earnings. Everything went smoothly as he meticulously tallied the cash from the register. However, when he opened the separate drawer where he had securely placed the $100 Hong Kong bill from the strange customer, shock nearly sent him toppling from his seat. Inside the drawer, instead of the expected real currency, lay a pristine, brand new hell note. As the employees witnessed this eerie transformation, their astonishment turned into a collective sense of dread. It was decided that the police needed to be called. Soon, the law enforcement officers arrived, albeit with a fair amount of skepticism regarding the bizarre tale they had been told. The police were willing to visit the house linked to the mysterious money, even though they couldn't quite believe the story. They arrived at the old house and began knocking on the door with determination. After a few moments of unanswered knocks, they decided to knock harder. Unexpectedly, as they did so, the door slowly creaked open. As the entrance swung inward, a nauseating stench came out of the door, similar to decaying rodents. It hit the officers' senses. The officers shone their flashlights into the house, and what they saw next was truly horrifying. There were 4 lifeless bodies laying on the floor in the living room. The bodies were heavily bloated. The scariest part were their eyes. All of their eyes were wide open, with a lot of red blood vessels completely covering where the whites used to be. There were also a ton of maggots feasting on the bodies. Forensics team was called in, and the results shocked everyone. These bodies have been dead for over 5 days now. All of the windows were tightly shut, and in the center of the living room was a charcoal pit. It was concluded that these 4 people committed suicide by charcoal inhalation. The officers knocked on all of the neighbors' doors, asking if they knew what happened that led this family to kill themselves. All of the neighbors were perplexed when they heard what had happened. That's when another strange thing happened. Most of the neighbors claimed that during the night, even as recent as last night, they always heard the family inside this house playing cards loudly or having boisterous conversations. This peculiar revelation left the officers perplexed and added an eerie layer to the mystery. How could the neighbors have heard such noises when, as the forensics team have discovered, the family have been deceased for over 5 days now? This contradiction only deepened the chilling mystery. To add another horrifying layer to this entire situation, the autopsy team made another chilling discovery. Within the stomachs of the 4 bodies, they found perfectly preserved, unchewed noodles and dumplings. The exact same food that was ordered from the restaurant. It was as if someone had poured this food down their throats, as none of it showed signs of being chewed. There were no prior incisions or any kind of cuts on the bodies, leaving everyone baffled as to how the food had entered their stomachs. Furthermore, the forensics team conducted extensive tests on the retrieved hell note from the restaurant. Their shocking conclusion sent shivers down the spines of all involved. The fingerprints on the bill were a perfect match for one of the victims found in the house. This meant that there was no one else inside the house who had handed Sammy and the boss this bill. It was the victim himself, the elderly man. This revelation only deepened the sinister aura surrounding the case. The inexplicable details continued to haunt those who have been involved in this nightmarish ordeal.